Hi, I'm Jim Adamski with Roth Sugarbush. I'm out here in the woods today with Kellen O'Connell, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to start out your main lines and how to mark in a main line. So the first thing that we typically do is we usually use a pink flagging tape. We'll go around the tree and we'll mark our starting point. And typically the first ribbon that we put on for our anchor tree is going to be where our grade is going to be. And then we'll put a second tape on so we can identify that as an anchor tree. So with these two tapes located on this particular tree, what we'll do is we've already determined that this is going to be our starting point elevation. So from this point here, we are going to use a Nikon Forestry Pro, and we'll use the Forestry Pro to shoot grade to our next tree and mark the elevation. Okay, so we are going to talk a little bit about setting mainline elevations. For this, we will be using our Nikon Forestry Pro. We are going to be using a nail anchor to put our next nail anchor in our tree. So our Forestry Pro does shoot in what we call degrees of slope. So for the maple world, basically is always in percentage of slope. So we are going to be using a conversion to take from degrees of slope from the Forestry Pro over to percentage of slope. Typically here in Wisconsin, we put in a lot of mainline at 0.75% of slope. The more slope is better, but unfortunately where we live here in the Midwest, we do not have a lot of options. We work with a lot of flat land. So what we'll do is I will shoot to the next tree. Kellen's going to put a nail anchor on. Kellen, if you want to explain the nailer a little bit.
So I'll just show real quick the nailer. So the nailer, all it is, it's basically a 6-inch piece of tubing that we cut out of our tubing. Cut about a 6-inch piece. We'll drill a hole through there, and then we'll put a 30-penny nail through that tubing. So what we'll do, I'll go up to the tree. Jim's going to tell me where my grade is, up or down. I will tack that nailer to the tree, not driving my nail all the way in. I'm going to leave that nail maybe halfway out. So that way, as the tree grows, the nailer or the tubing will slide on the nail as it pushes out.
Okay, up, down just a little bit, right about there. So what we did is we marked our elevation basically to that next nail anchor. So the next shot that we'll use using the Forestry Pro, we'll shoot from that nail anchor to our next tree.
Okay, so now that we have our elevation, which we need to start at for our anchor tree figured out, we're going to use, we call these a tree saver. So basically all this is a chunk of 1-inch pipe that we have with, again, a 30-penny nail in there. We're just going to take this chunk of pipe, which will fit around the tree in a U shape. We're eventually going to run our wire through there, which we'll get to in a later step. So I know this pink ribbon is the grade that I need to be. I'm going to take my end of line here, my tree saver. I'm just going to tap that in about halfway again. So again, I like to only drive that in, that 30-penny nail, about halfway into the tree. So then as that tree grows, there's room for that pipe to move. Okay, so now that we have both of our anchors in at the first tree and the last tree, nailers in between, now what we're going to do is we're going to go take our wire. We're using a 12.5 gauge high tensile wire. We're going to run this through our nailers and anchor at the end. So now we're to our first nailer, and when we get to our nailers, we want to put our wire underneath the nail every time we do this. So this is just going to be a guide for our wire. So the reason that we want to go under the nail is if a tree were to fall on our wire, the wire should just break right through the pipe and fall to the ground. That way our nail should stay intact. We still know where our grade's going to be through the woods as we go.
So 12.5 gauge high tensile wire, jumbo Gripples is what we run. You can have your arrows, they show exactly which way the wire goes in there. That way you can't really have that. You can only go through one way, you can't push it the other. Wire on, or Gripple on. Put the wire through the tree saver, coming out the other side. And this is where you'll go through the other part of your Gripple. Lock it in, leave a couple 4, 5, 6 inches out there so you can forever grab onto it and need to tighten or adjust or anything you need to do, you should be good. All right, now we're back at the beginning of the line. I'm going to pull out a little bit of wire, enough to go around the tree back to a Gripple. I'm going to cut that, and I will come back to use that in a second. Same thing with the Gripple. There again, following the arrows through, back to the other hole, leaving 6-8 inches out there again. But now before you tighten this up, we're going to use tension grips on the main line. So tension grips on the main line. Going to use a wire to tighten them up as well. So before I tighten up that mainline wire, I'm going to run a wire through just in case my pipe kinks. I can run this through and get some extra wire for a tension grip. Now I have that in place for when we pull the pipe. I can pull the slack out of my mainline wire, keeping the gripples far enough away from them trees so it doesn't create a shear point in them gripples. Now that we got this snugged up, gripple tool, we can go on to our tag end gripple tools. You can either open them all the way up and that forces the clamp open, or you can do it by hand. Either way, I prefer to just open it up. That wire goes, the tag end goes there, gripple slides right in place. Now as you close, this will hang on to it. It can hang there all by itself if you want. But then you just work it till it's tight and then take it off, cut off your excess, and you're done. So after we get our wires strung up, we usually go through, double check everything with a mainline level. We sell these little brackets here to go on a nice level. Hanger on. You can see we have grade. Every woods is obviously different. More grade the better. Bare minimum, you're not a lot of grade on there sometimes. Anyhow, so you're checking all this and obviously starting from your lowest point, working through the woods. That way you aren't starting in the middle and just picking a destination.
So now that we know that we have grade on our mainline wire here, I'm going to go through with my post. So we generally use a 2x2 cedar post. A lot of times we'll try to put an angle cut on them so the water will run off. But as we sit here, I'm going to I cut an 8-foot post in half because this wire is relatively low. I'm going to bring my cedar post to my wire and I'm going to anchor my wire to the post. So what I'm going to do with that is I use a chunk of plumber strap. It's just a perforated strap, hole strap anyways. We'll generally cut them at 5 holes. We'll split it in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that over the middle, attach it to my wire, and then I will take a screw and screw it into place. So now I'll look again, just double check my level. Okay, I know I have grade there. I'm going to come and I'm going to screw my post to my clip. Okay, so once that in, now my wire is going to be sag free because it's going to be supported by that post. So we're going to work our way through the woods and we'll try to put a post on a single 1-inch main line wherever needed. When we do 2-line systems, we'll try to go closer to every 10 feet. We're just going to add a couple more posts into this little short run that we got. Okay, so now we've worked our way a little bit farther up the line again. We're continuing our posting. We're going to do one more post here. So again, we're just checking with our main line level that we have grade. I have a full bubble of grade there. So I'm going to take my clip, put it on the wire, take my screw, and I'm going to attach it.
We really like to do this before we hang pipe on the wet dry systems on a 2-line, so that way you're not fighting that weight of the pipe. You can get your line 100% supported, everything, so when you tap your or tag your line to it, it's never moving.
Yep, and being that it's all posted now and supported, the next step that we're going to go do is we're going to put our actual main line and pipe to this wire. Okay, so now that we have our wire all up to grade and posted, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put our main line up. So you can pull from the top side or the bottom side with your main line. This particular main line, we're going to start from the bottom side and pull uphill, which is obviously going to be a little bit more physically challenging, but for this line, it's just the way it's going to be. So since we're starting on the bottom side of the line, we're going to work to the end of the line. The first thing that we need to do is put our plug in. So what we're going to do for that is we have a 1-inch stainless steel plug, barbed fitting. We try to use everything stainless steel. It's got a sharper bite to the barbs. It's a bigger diameter, so the pipe actually needs to stretch over the plug itself. So Greg is going to warm the pipe up, ream it out a little bit, and then we'll tap the plug in. So best way that we usually figure to ream the pipe out a little is we just are using our tubing cutter. It's a tapered end. We're just trying to open up that pipe a little bit. After we reamed it out, we'll give it one more shot of heat. And it's cold outside today too, so we're going to give that stainless fitting just a little shot of heat just to warm that up before it goes into the pipe. Okay. And then I'll give you that. Tapping in with a hammer.
Plug in, tapping it in. Don't bash your knuckles.
It's a fine line too of overheating the pipe where it could possibly kink, and a good fit. So that looks pretty nice. So now that we've got the plug in, we do a double hose clamp on every fitting that we use in the wood. So every time that we put a barb fitting in, we use 2 clamps. So I usually always like to do them facing the same direction. So we'll slide those over the plug here, and then we'll tighten them down. So generally, when we tighten our plugs up here, I like to put the screw of the clamp on the top side of the pipe where it's kind of U-shaped. So you'll see when we get a little farther down as to why.
We like to stack them right on top of each other, and you'll see there again at the end of the line why we like to do that.
Okay, so now we have our plug, our end of line plug in. We have it double clamped. That plug's never coming out of there. We're going to work our way down the line to get to the end. So from here, we're just going to start walking it out. So now that we're up to our anchor tree at the end of the line, this will be the top side of the hill. We've got our plugged end. What we do is we take our hose clamps and we'll kind of wedge them into the V of this wire. So I'll take that and I'll pull that in nice and tight as I can pull it.
And then what we do is we usually double up wire ties. So we'll take 2 wire ties together. They're a little bit stronger. We'll come up here and we'll use our spin tool to attach some doubled up wire ties that'll hold that pipe in place. And then as we go down the main line, what we want to do is we want to keep the main line up attached to the wire. So we'll put a wire tie on approximately every 20 feet or so, just a loose tie to keep our pipe up before we put our tension on with our tension grip. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put our loose tie on. So like say we'll put the wire tie on. For a 1-inch main line, we're using the 6-inch wire tie. We attach it through the tool. We can pull up on the tool that'll hold it in place and just tighten it up. We want to leave them tight because we're going to pull tension on this main line to pull the slack out of it.
So now that we have our main line strung through the woods on our wire and it's loose tied every 20 feet coming back, we're going to take our main line and we're going to try to get tension onto the main line to keep it nice and tight. So we use a tension grip. So it's basically like a Chinese finger trap with a hook on it. So we're going to be able to put that on our main line and pull that forward. So we'll also use a hose clamp over our tension grip just to make sure that that bites nice and tight into the pipe and that it doesn't have any opportunity to slip. So I'm going to set my hose clamp on there first, and then I'll put my tension grip on. And then we'll work the tension grip down the pipe. Okay. So now that we have worked down the pipe a little ways, what you're going to want to do with the tension grip is you want to figure out which way your line is going to be facing. So for this particular line, we're going to be coming to our anchor tree and we're going to be facing towards the left. With that being said, we want to have our loop on the right. So now we'll earlier in the video, we put a wire through our anchor tree for our tension grip, and now we're going to use that wire. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to slide it through here, hand it off to Greg.
Gripple on. One side, leave a couple 6 inches out. The other side, 6 inches out.
Before he pulls anything too tight, now I'm going to pull my tension grip farther back just to pull some slack out of it. Okay, that's as far as I can go by hand. And now we'll take our Gripple tool. Well, hang on, let me go back a step. Now we're going to attach our hose clamp before we start doing any tensioning on the line. So I'm going to take my hose clamp and I'm going to crank it tight right over the top of the tension grip, so that just bites the tension grip into the pipe a little bit better. So as he goes to pull, that tension grip can't slip.
And here I'm pulling a little bit of slack from this wire by hand just so I don't got to crank it that much more. Now back to that Gripple tool. Use that to snug it tight. There we go.
Now we're going to go back through, and the wire ties that we put on and loose tied, we're going to snug them back up so that they're tight. We want to make sure that we're putting a wire tie on every 12 inches. In this scenario, we are going to come very close to our post. So what we want to do is we want to put a wire tie on each side of our post. And what that does is that allows the wire tie to hold the post in place. So for this particular one here, we're going to just put the wire tie on both sides of the post, get them tightened up. And what that does is that prevents our post from moving or tipping over.